Okay, we'll start with VMware. Now, VMware has made it very difficult for you to find the free version of VMware. So both VirtualBox and VMware have free versions. Now, VMware Workstation Player, which was formerly known as Player Pro, is the desktop virtualization application that is available for free for personal use only. Now, if you Google it, you're going to find it very difficult to find. They don't want you to have the free version, clearly. They want you to have the paid-for version, which is VMware Workstation Pro. So in order for you to find the free version, you can go to this FAQ here, which will help give you a better understanding of what the player does. But if you scroll down, you can find the download link there. And that will take you through to here. These are the downloads for the free version of the latest version, which is here. Now, it's 12 at the moment, but when you look at this, it may be a new version. So you're going to have to really check the website out to find out where the latest version is, or the latest free version for non-commercial use, which is VMware Workstation Player. And you have a Windows version here, and we have a Linux version. So you want to download the version that you want to download so that you can install it. There is a VMware version for Mac, and that's called VMware Fusion and VMware Fusion Pro. You do have to pay for that, so that's for Mac users. Now, if you want to compare the difference between VMware Workstation Player and VMware Workstation Pro, there is a link here, which is compare. And it'll talk about the differences between VMware Workstation Player and Workstation Pro. But essentially with the Player, you have less functionality. Now, this won't affect you really for a test environment, but it is going to affect you when it comes to security and privacy. And we'll talk more about that later. So download the file from here. And you're going to end up with your VMware Player. Obviously, we're going through it here as to how to install it with Windows, but it is pretty similar in the other operating systems. Click Next, accept the terms, add the enhanced keyboard driver. I'm going to remove these, but that's up to you. But you do definitely want updates if you're going to use this later on as a method of isolation for security. So that's installed. So you can see that was pretty simple. There we have the player. And this one's picked up that I already have a Windows 7 virtual machine on here. So that's because I went here while it was installing, and which I showed you before, selected Windows 7 operating system. Obviously I can pick any that I wanted. Let's remove this from the library and show you how I would add it. From this website, I would want to open the virtual machine because it's given me a file in a format that requires me to open it. There's the file, OVF file, open, import. Now this may take quite a bit of time depending on the speed of your machine. So that's now installed. If we click on it and click play, that will now start the operating system. If you right click on it and settings, you can see all the various virtual devices that have been set up. Now you may or may not have a network adapter that's been detected and placed here. If you haven't, then you need to add it here, select network adapter, next, and then select the appropriate option here. Now, this is a crucial setting when you want to do any form of looking at network traffic. Now, in some sections of this, we're going to look at network traffic using protocol analyzers called Wireshark. Now, in order to do that, you must have it in bridged mode. Bridged mode means that you connect, as it says here, directly to the physical network. Now, if you use NAT, you're using this machine here as a form of gateway, which means you won't be able to see the network traffic. So we need to set this to bridged if we're looking at network traffic. Cancel that, as we already have one here. And these are the options here. Because we've downloaded a virtual image, it means we haven't had to go through any of these settings, deciding on what operating system it is, etc. So let me start the operating system. Now, depending on what you've downloaded, it will already have something called VMware tools installed. The VMware tools are software drivers that enable the display to work correctly, USB to work correctly, all the sort of drivers that you would have. Say if you bought a Sony laptop, Sony gives you a whole bunch of Sony type drivers, and you have the equivalent VMware type drivers, which are called VMware tools. So you're likely to get prompted if you don't have those VMware tools installed, or more likely if they're out of date. Now, if they are, now you want to go here, manage, update VMware tools, and go through the process of installing those tools. Now, it's giving you some instructions here about if you don't see it being installed, then go to dsetup.exe. So go through that process, install it just like you install any other software. There we go, we can see it here. And we install it. Now it's saying it needs to update these, and the reason it's saying that is because obviously VMware tools are already installed. And those processes are running because of that. And there we go, it's finished. And it's asking to reboot. And of course, now you've got your operating system, whatever it might be. You can play around with it to your heart's content, and don't worry if something goes wrong. Now, if you look here, you can see that you can pause this, so you can suspend it. Click yes here, and it has paused it. And that essentially takes the memory, makes a copy of it, and then you can restart it from that pause position. Now, one of the downsides with the VMware Workstation Player is that you cannot do something what's called snapshots. And a snapshot is taking a copy of the current state of that virtual machine. So it takes everything that's in memory, and it takes a copy of the hard disk, and it creates an entire copy of it. This means you can make a mistake and then revert back, and you can have a whole tree of different snapshots where you're making different changes and different updates. Now, you cannot do that with this, and that's a little bit of a pain, and you may or may not want that feature. VirtualBox does do that, however, and I would suggest you play around with both of them to see which one you like. And if you're going to take virtualization more seriously, you may end up buying the Pro version of VMware, because that has more features than VirtualBox. So you'll have to see what you end up liking. Now, to install via a disk or an ISO image, you need to either get a hold of the ISO image or the disk. Here is an example of going to Debian's website, downloading from here. I end up with this ISO image, and then I want to click on here, File, New Virtual Machine, and if I have a physical disk, then I want to put it in the drive and make sure that this virtual machine can access it, or I can go with the ISO image, which is the more common option. So if I browse here onto my downloads, there's the ISO image, open that, then click next, call it what I like. As this is for testing purposes, these settings don't really matter. You don't need to worry about the size here. It's going to allocate 20 gigabyte for the drive, but what it does is it starts small on your disk and then gets bigger as it uses more. So it literally is a virtual disk, and it is better to split the disk into multiple files. But if you read here, you can see what it says. Splitting the disk makes it easier to move the virtual machine to another computer, but may reduce performance with very large disks. Next, we can customize this. We already talked about this setting. You can change this to bridged. Finish. And then you go through the process of installing the operating system as you would normally. So you may or may not be familiar with how you install Debian, or if this was Windows, it would come up with the Windows options for how you install with Windows. And this is how we install Debian. This is why it's better to get these virtual images when you're testing, because it saves you having to go through this whole install process. So I'll close that.